the book in terms of its overarching areas, and I have got more videos on the YouTube site which goes into the areas much more detail. This is really just to kind of give you the overview. A great individual who is coachable, has coachability if you like, okay, works well on these three areas. Number one, they're great at just holding on, assessing, coming up with, developing, agreeing, discussing possibilities. Possibilities for their own development, possibilities for the team, possibilities that of course link into all these things. You know, is it possible I can develop this skill? Yes, just hold on to that fact that it is possible. Is it possible I can get fitter? Yes. Is it possible I can develop a winning attitude? Yes. Okay? So someone who's really working well with a coach just takes all that in, just holds on to these different possibilities and just hangs on to them. Okay? Now sometimes when you look at role modelling up here maybe, it might not be possible that you develop the same skill set as player X, who's probably, you know, the best in the world or the best there ever has been, that legend. Okay? But it's possible that you can be something like that or similar to that or do it in your own way, whatever level you're playing at. Okay? So a great individual will hold on to that possibility. Okay? So either it comes from the individual or the coach, and let's say the possibility is playing in the league above where you're currently standing. Hold that as onto a possibility. And of course, psychology-wise, if you're not aspiring, I mean, you don't have to, of course, depending on your goals, but if you're not aspiring necessarily to the next league or the better team in the league or whatever it might be, then, you know, that psychology, skills and strength and conditioning is going to stay at that level. It's unlikely, therefore you can get there. So the psychology really gets you there along with the hard work at the top. Okay? So that's possibilities, playing, let's say, in a league above. Now perception is holding on to these different possibilities and allowing your perception to shift and change. Okay? So when you come up with the idea or your coach says next year or the year after, whatever, we want to be playing in a league above, hold on to your perception, just hang on to it and just start to think what that means to you. Okay? So far, if you've held on to the possibility, hopefully you've made it ring true to your own values of wanting to play in that higher league. Okay? And it really has to resonate with you. You know, if that higher league involves a different geography and you don't want to spend that time traveling, then maybe that won't resonate with you. So be really authentic when you're moving on to this perception area. Okay? You have to be up for the change and you have to listen to your emotions to get yourself to number two. Okay? Now, number two in perception is things like being very curious about your skills, your strength and conditioning, your psychology, reflecting on these, you know, a day after, a week after a game going, you know, did I have enough fuel in the tank? Were my skill levels? What was that other team doing? You know, formation. Just really reflect and being curious about your possibilities. Okay? The other thing to do when you're assessing your perception is to really challenge yourself and others around you. The challenge starts with you, depending on your sport. It might be an individual sport, but you're still going to have a team around you, whether it's a support team or in a team sport, you'll have other people. Okay? So to really challenge yourself. Okay? Challenge that perception. Okay? And then finally, a great way to hold on to this perception and let it shift and change and move is for you to ask questions of yourself and other people around you, and importantly, respond to the questions coming in from the coach. Okay? So when you're assessing your perception, let's look at when you're with a coach. Be really curious. So when the coach says, how do you think you did last week in terms of that? Be really reflective and really curious. Okay? When the coach asks, what more can you do here? You've got to bring that level of challenge. Okay? You also need that support and rest. Obviously, you know, if you overtrain, you're not doing enough rest. So we need to bring that in as well. And fundamentally, really hold on to that question that people, coaches, the support team, yourself, teammates, friends, family are asking. You know, how could you be different? How could you do more? So that's the perception part. And then finally, in terms of performance, obviously this is where the rubber hits the road now, is in terms of performance, you're at the business end of things now where things are obviously starting to change. They have to change. Now, a great individual who gets the most from the world-class coach is making a change. Performance is shifting in some way. Okay? Here you've got to be really clear on your goals. What are your personal goals? What are you striving towards? What are the team, if appropriate, striving towards? Now, when you work with a coach initially, you might have some ideas of, yes, we want to play in a higher league, whatever it might be. But towards the end of that maturity of this kind of change, that psychology that you're moving through, that's when you know yourself better. That's when you know your goals better. That's when those goals really connect and resonate with you and others around you. Okay? That's important. A good indicator here, if you are being coachable, if you have this coachability, is your network is changing. Things are changing around you that you didn't have at the start when this coach walked through the door. Okay? So for example, you might be seeking great advice around nutrition on 3 or 4 websites that you hadn't even thought of or looked at beforehand. Okay? You're speaking to people in your network who can now help you with all the above. Okay? You're just grabbing onto these resources, and maybe, and here's an interesting one of course, your networks, if they're changing because you're adding internet resources, or let's say subscribing for the magazine, Athletics Weekly or Rugby World, whatever it might be, you're just bringing new things into your network to inform all these changes. And importantly, maybe saying no to some previously held networks that weren't serving you. That could be people or where you were spending your time. Okay? So it's a really interesting one. So I think of those people who aren't supporting all this because they like to take you out for a beer or whatever it might be, okay? You've got to be really tight on that network around you. Okay? And you can see examples of that in sport. Andy Murray is a great example in tennis of where his network fundamentally changed around him. He's got a great support team around him, and I'm lucky enough to work with British Tennis to have a bit of an insight into that, and it's working for him. Okay, and on that point, I haven't mentioned anyone yet, but here we go. I think he's more coachable now than he ever has been. Okay, he's got Ivan Lendl at the helm. He's got a great support team around him. That network is working for him, definitely. Yes, I'd say he's always had the skill, so that's always gone up in the expected curve. He has improved that, we know that, but he's improved that a long time ago. He talked about 10 years ago in Wimbledon when he was eating pizza between matches and stuff like that. We know he's improved that and cramping up and stuff, and he's phenomenally fit. But that's the bit that's improving, that coachability, that psychology for him, as an example. And again, I'm sure that's dividing opinion even mentioning that. Okay, but his network is changing. And the final one here is about having energy. Not quite in just necessarily in strength and conditioning, just having more energy for coaching, for being with a coach, being with the team, being curious, perception, and all these different things. And that's really the journey. If you can assess your direction, where do I want to go? And at the end of it, then you've got a sense, you've got more energy for the sport, for your teammates, practice, tuition, assessing your performance, playback, all the rest of it, then that's where you have more energy for that and have energy for the coaching. Okay? Because if you don't have energy for the coaching, it's a bit like bench pressing. If you haven't got energy to lift the weights, if you haven't got the energy to work with your coach, then we know that you're missing out on some of that. If you're a maverick, you're all right, you've got the skills and strength conditioning, happy days. But if you want the whole game, the whole piece, and that's where you just go from that fine line, like the Andy Murray, the fine line of breaking in and winning the Grand Slams. It's just a very small margin between the top players, frighteningly so, and you have to have all those. Okay, so it's not about the coach. It's a brand new area. There's no books on the market that delves into this at all, and it's such an important area because we waste a lot of time in coaching because you bring in these great coaches, and a lot of time people spend a lot of money on this, but if the team aren't coachable, the individual isn't coachable, then fundamentally we're slowing things down and wasting time. I do think people can get there. They can develop that with a world-class coach, but the idea of the book, the resources that I put together on my website, which is stormbeach.co.uk, are designed to accelerate and speed that up and really get people ready for that when these great people are around them.